Good evening and welcome to the CUNY Academy for this installment of AP Government. Building responsible voters one video at a time. All right, that was a little Packer music there for the few Packer fans that are out there, and of course for you, Prosciutti, because I know you don't even listen to it, so I'm glad you fast forwarded over it. Now you're stuck listening to me. All right, so what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit of checks and balances on the bureaucracy. This is the most important concept to get in the course because, not in the course, but as far as understanding the bureaucracy goes, all right? So what you need to understand in the bureaucracy is something that you see here called the iron triangle, all right? I figured it out that this is basically on every single exam in some way, shape, or form that has been released. I think there's been 9 released exams by the College Board. The iron triangle is on every single one of them, okay? I also found out the hard way last year that just knowing what it is not enough, as when I scored some kids from Mundelein last year, almost all of them did not get the point on the iron triangle, okay? So what you have is you have Congress, all right? More specifically, the committees within Congress, all right, make up one component of the triangle, okay? They are working with interest groups, all right? Several of them together, a couple interest groups, one who knows, all right? And they are working with the bureaucratic agency, okay, to implement policy. All right, so the way we remember this to know the components of it are big C, okay? Bureaucracy, interest groups, Congress or congressional committees. Those are who make up the iron triangle. Now, how did we miss the point last year? It was because what is happening is interest groups are pressuring Congress to pass a law. Congress is responding to that pressure with a law that is going to benefit the interest group, and then Congress and the interest group both put pressure on the bureaucracy to implement the law and pass the rules the way that they see fit. So they all work together, and the key is there is some pressure and response involved between the congressional committee and members of the interest groups in the bureaucracy that are kind of all working together to pass policy in their favor, okay? Now, nowadays we refer to what are called issue networks, which are basically the same thing, okay, except there's more components to that. Not only do we have the big C in the iron triangle, but issue networks also include think tanks, which, as we said before, are like research institutes that do policy work for the parties, okay? The media is part of an issue network, okay? Universities, and several other. Your book will give a detailed example of issue networks. They're basically the same thing, iron triangles and issue networks. Issue networks is just kind of a newer way to refer to these, okay? The irony is if you talk to someone in government, they would know what you're talking about for either of these terms. These are purely academic terms to describe policymaking. All right, now how is the bureaucracy kept in check? All right, those are influences on the bureaucracy from external factors. Here's how they are checked within the system of government, okay? The president can appoint and remove agency heads. He cannot remove regulatory agency heads because they have longer terms than the president, all right? We'll get into these on Wednesday in class a little bit more, okay? There's a famous Daily Show clip where John McCain is asked, what would be the first thing you'd do as president after the financial crisis? And he said, I'd fire the head of the Securities Exchange Commission, or SEC. And Jon Stewart says, great, so your first move as president will be to fire somebody you don't have the authority to fire. Way to go, John McCain. Presidents can also reorganize the bureaucracy as long as Congress approves of it, so they can restructure it. We saw that with the Department of Homeland Security, okay, where we took something like the Border Patrol and customs agents who used to be under the Department of Commerce and restructured them under Homeland Security. Somebody may have personally experienced that out there, but I won't mention names. They can make changes in an agency's budget proposals, all right? That don't pass the budget, but they can propose to change that. And they can ignore legislative initiatives, all right? So when rules are passed, the president can basically ignore those rules through executive order to limit their effect, all right? So that's how the president controls the bureaucracy that's under his control. He can also initiate or adjust policies that would alter its activities. So again, Congress has to approve it, but he could call for a bill that limits the role of the EPA, for example, okay? He issues executive orders to the bureaucracy to tell them what to do and not do, which limits or expands their power, and he could propose a reduction in their budget, all right, from year to year. Cannot withhold funds, as we learned with Nixon, but those are a check that he has. Congressional checks. Obviously, passing legislation is what is most important, okay? They pass laws that alters the agency's activities. They could abolish a program. If Congress doesn't like the job an agency's doing, they could get rid of it, all right? In fact, you could ask Rick Perry which 3 agencies he would get rid of if he became president. He would get rid of the Department of Energy, the Department of Education, and oops, you had to be there. Okay, Congress can do its investigative powers and do oversight over the bureaucracy. They do have the right to force people to testify. Okay, they can subpoena bureaucrats and ask them to testify about an agency's activities. Now you know that the president's check on that is executive privilege, so he can protect that bureaucrat from testifying as well. You're going to see a lot of that with the NSA moving forward. Congress can influence the appointments of agency heads because they have to confirm them when they are up for Senate nomination. And Congress can write legislation which limits what a bureaucracy can do. We saw that with the trains there in Mundelein. Okay, so those are your legislative checks and your executive checks. Okay, judicial. Simply, they can decide whether or not the bureaucrats have acted within the lines of the Constitution. They can use judicial review, declare executive acts or bureaucratic acts unconstitutional, and Supreme Court can issue an injunction where they tell an agency to stop something. They could force an agency to stop implementing a program or a policy until the case can be heard to determine whether or not that action violates the Constitution. So those are about the only powers that judicial has over the bureaucracy. All right. There's also whistleblowers. Okay. You might think of Mr. Snowden as a whistleblower, somebody within the agency that reveals the activities that the agency's doing. They release it to the media. The media does an expose about it, and the agency is kind of investigated by Congress because the people have gotten up in arms about the issue. Okay, but whistleblowers kind of have some protections and some limitations as well as to what they can do. We'll get into that a little bit more, but whistleblowing is another check on the bureaucracy, but it kind of comes from within. I think Time Magazine in about 2009, 2010, the whistleblower was actually the person of the year who revealed all of these shady shenanigans that were going on in government. All right, so thank you for listening to the CUNY Academy, where we are building responsible voters, one video at a time. All right, we'll see you on Wednesday.